Centered around a dramatic winter murder, a victim is discovered dead in a snow-covered area. Detectives must quickly investigate and follow the clues in the freezing weather, where evidence can be erased or lost due to snow and the passage of time. Snow blanketed the Detroit suburbs, and dusk was settling. Christmas lights twinkled, making the scene feel warm, radiant, and beautiful, until the tranquility shattered with a terrified scream from a woman stepping outside to clear snow on the small path behind her house. What she saw struck her with horror. A man sat motionless in his car, eyes wide open, dark red bloodstains covering the driver's seat of the old vehicle he occupied, with multiple bullet wounds on his body. Others quickly became alarmed, and the police were promptly called to the scene. The police sirens broke the silence, with flashing red and blue lights illuminating the area. Crime scene tape was set up as neighbors and onlookers peeked through their windows and down the street, watching the officers' every move. Any hope for a peaceful holiday season now seemed far-fetched. They realized that violence and looming dangers were becoming a serious threat in their neighborhood. The victim, a young man, was confirmed to have died several hours prior with numerous bullet wounds. The windshield in front of him bore circular marks and cracks where bullets had pierced through. Blood spatter covered the steering wheel and interior, his face frozen in shock, eyes wide open, seatbelt still fastened, and the doors securely locked from the inside. There were no signs of a struggle or prior resistance. The bitter cold was complicating the time of death estimation, as the body had already become rigid, making it challenging to remove him from the car. There were a total of 6 bullet wounds. The entire magazine had been unloaded into his body. It was evident the killer intended murder and did not act on impulse. Police carefully surveyed the scene, ensuring no potential evidence was disturbed. Veteran investigator Detective Smith noticed a trail of deep footprints in the snow leading from the car toward the main road. The killer must have fled in that direction, but the snow was steadily covering up vital clues. Time was against them. Bullet casings were found just beneath the snow, a mere meter from the car's front, near the driver's side. The killer had stood right there, mercilessly firing at the victim. 6 casings in total were recovered, from a commonly used handgun in the area. The victim was identified as David Martin, a 22-year-old college student in the area. A cell phone was found inside the car, next to the victim. Its screen was still blinking. A well-used older model with scratches and a partially cracked screen, apparently damaged long before the incident, yet still functioning well. There were a few recent messages from newly installed apps, mainly shopping sites and games. The phone had been reset to factory settings just over a month prior. Investigators would examine all messages and calls to see if they could yield any useful clues. Detective Smith and his partner, Detective Lisa Monroe, surveyed the area around the crime scene. Surrounding them were snow-covered streets and numerous narrow alleys, but no surveillance cameras in the vicinity. This place is a hotspot for drug-related activities, from small-time sales to gang operations, along with disputes over territory, retaliation, and young people being misled and drawn into criminal networks, Smith noted. In questioning those present near the crime scene, all reported hearing nothing unusual. Even the homeowner with a backyard facing the road where the victim's car was found reported no sound. The weather's too cold. Most people stay inside with their windows shut. Soft arguments might go unheard, but gunshots should be loud enough. If no one heard anything, it's likely the killer used a silencer. This was a deliberate, premeditated murder, and it's certain the killer had some connection to the victim. In the investigation room, the team gathered and reviewed the case file. The crime scene was marked on a map, along with multiple red flags indicating drug hotspots and gang clashes in the area, a central hub for criminal activity. However, after checking the victim's background, they discovered David Martin, 24, a university student with no prior offenses. So, what was he doing in a meth dealing zone? Could he have been a newcomer, lured into this world? Upon examining Martin's phone, they found no incoming calls before the incident, but did find a message from an unknown number. "Meet me, urgent." There was no location mentioned, but the message arrived the same afternoon of the murder. It was possible this location was a regular meeting spot or near the sender's residence. The number was traced to Raymond Carter, a small-time dealer who had previously encountered law enforcement yet always managed to avoid charges. Martin's rented apartment was promptly searched. He had been renting a small room near his university, rarely returning home over the past year. According to the landlord, the building had 3 rooms on 3 floors. The landlord seldom saw Martin, who paid rent on time via bank transfer and had no roommates. Most of the building's residents hardly ever saw him. He seemed busy and seldom returned to his room. Inside, officers found a small packet of white powder confirmed as meth, and fingerprints were collected for investigation. Martin's friends at school shared that he had once been outgoing but had recently become withdrawn over the past year. He grew quieter, missed group activities, and gradually distanced himself, looking tired and worn down. A mysterious man had started visiting Martin at school several times in the past month. The security guard recalled the visits vividly, as Martin used to be friendly, always greeting him, and the guard was fond of the polite young man. The guy who met him was strange-looking, dressed normally, but his face had a defiant look, and he had a terrible temper. He kicked a trash can at the gate once when he was upset about something. He'd smile sweetly when he saw Martin, but it seemed he was luring him into something bad with how often he visited, acting quite suspiciously. Simultaneously, the police summoned Carter for questioning. His address was near the crime scene. The team arrived at his house, stationing some officers at the back while others observed the area. The doorbell rang and Carter opened the door almost immediately, his expression sour as he saw the police. "What is it this time? What excuse do you have to harass me again?" he grumbled. "Raymond Carter, you're suspected of being involved in David Martin's death. Here's a summons. Come with us for questioning." Though Carter looked fearful at the summons, he quickly masked it with resentment and followed the officers. "I didn't kill anyone." Carter denied any connection to Martin's death. "I only knew him from online gaming and met up with him a few times. That message doesn't mean anything. I just wanted him to pay back a small debt he owed. He didn't show, but I have no clue who else he might have gone to meet. It's got nothing to do with me." Unpaid debt can be a motive for murder. Where were you at the time of the incident? "At home, alone, and the debt was so small I wouldn't kill him over it. What do you think I am, crazy?" At the same time, fingerprint analysis on the meth packet from Martin's apartment matched Raymond Carter's. He looked slightly rattled but continued denying involvement. Moreover, surveillance from the school entrance showed that the man meeting Martin there was not Raymond Carter. The meth packet also bore a second set of fingerprints. Carter definitely knew this person, who was likely connected to the crime as well. After intense questioning, Carter finally disclosed information on one of his associates. Fine, it wasn't me, it was Carl Jennings. You know how quick-tempered he is." Records on Carl were promptly compiled. He was a small-time dealer, similar to Carter, with one prior arrest and a history of violent tendencies. Using location data from Carl's phone, officers pinpointed his location to an abandoned warehouse on the city's outskirts. A swift raid was planned. The place is likely a hideout for a network of small-time dealers. That area is another gang hotspot. We need to act fast to catch the entire group. As expected, people began entering and exiting the location continuously from early evening. The police surrounded the area, catching both dealers and buyers leaving the warehouse. They reported Carl had been inside since the night before, tense and fearful, with his violent temper apparently escalating. The metal door was kicked open as tactical officers stormed in, advancing quickly over the walls. A few criminals scattered. Carl was among them, holding a gun, but fear was clear in his eyes. Shots rang out, but fortunately no casualties occurred. Carl, who fired, was struck in the arm and was taken into custody for questioning. Carl completely denied his crimes until he was confronted with evidence from the police. The gun he carried was the murder weapon, and Carter's testimony left him no room for denial. Carl faced multiple serious charges, but he was terrified because for the first time, he realized the consequences of his uncontrolled temper. He had killed someone. I didn't mean to kill him, but he pushed me too far. He bought drugs from me after owing Carter an unpayable debt. He tricked me into giving him the drugs by claiming he had a good relationship with Carter. Then I told Carter about this, and he revealed the truth to me. I was so angry that I lost control. Ultimately, the truth about the student's death was revealed, and it was even more heartbreaking. Martin had been lured and deceived by Carter. They met through a tech-selling website where Carter sold the student things he needed at a low price without realizing they were the criminal evidence that his associates brought to him in exchange for drugs. Martin, a young man focused on his studies and with little exposure to the outside world, was easily manipulated by Carter into addiction. Just one moment of temptation led him down a path with a tragic ending. Martin's family came to claim their loved one's body, engulfed in profound grief. His mother fainted from the shock of losing her son. David was studying engineering. He wanted to do something meaningful. He couldn't have been involved with drugs. How can I believe that? Friends who knew Martin were devastated by his sudden passing. They had always seen a bright future for the talented and passionate young man, only for it all to become meaningless. Raymond Carter faced severe condemnation for his morally corrupt actions everywhere, on the news and across social media. Extremist groups even visited his home and protested outside the courtroom, demanding severe punishment for his actions. Murder is a crime. Even though Raymond Carter did not pull the trigger that killed Martin, his actions led to tragic deaths that afflicted many unfortunate lives and caused great loss to society. The protesters were parents and students like Martin. This case highlighted a major issue. Not only was Martin lured down the wrong path, but many other young people, including minors, were also falling into similar situations. The insecurity and youth crime problem demanded that justice be served. No matter how long the fight would take or how cunning the criminals might be, law enforcement was determined to continue working and never give up. The law must always be upheld,